Hey there and welcome to how to save and export in Photoshop. Now this is the very last video in our tutorial. I hope you've enjoyed hanging out with me and learning a ton about layers and groups. Now if you haven't already done so, please leave us a review right there on the tutorial page. It helps all of our students know what you thought of the tutorial and it helps us out a ton as well. Alright, thanks so much. Now when it comes to saving out your files, this is a question I get all the time because it happens a lot. People are like, they work on their images, everything looks great in Photoshop, but then they try to save it out for the web and things don't look right. Okay, so that's one of the things we're going to address here. We're going to make sure all of your colors look perfect when you get things on the web. Another question I get asked all the time is, hey, should I flatten my image? What's going on with flatten? What file format should I save out? And there just seems to be a lot of questions about like knowing which file formats to use and which versions to save in your files. So here's my advice. My first piece of advice is you want to make sure you're always saving two versions of your files. One of these versions is going to be your layered file, okay? And this is a PSD or a TIFF. Now this version is the version you're going to come back to at any point in time and be able to work on your layers. Okay, so that's your version. Again, a layered file, PSD or TIFF, that's for you. Now the other version, that's going to be for your clients, it's going to be for the web, that's going to be for export, and that most of the time is going to be a JPEG, and we're going to show you how to export that out to get the perfect settings for the web. Okay, so make sure you always have a layered file for you and then another file that you're going to be using for the web or for print, everything like that. So let's go ahead and show you guys everything you need to know about saving and exporting your files. So to start off with, let's open up our sample images here. We're in chapter 3, workflow and saving, and section 3, how to save and export. Now let's open up our JPEG here. There we go. I'm going to hit F for full screen, and I'm just going to do some real simple stuff to this photo. So starting off, I'm going to create a new layer here. We're going to zoom into the bottom of our subject's dress, and I'm going to grab our spot healing brush tool, and I'm going to do some work on removing some of these wrinkles. Okay, now I am on a new layer here. Okay, you can see this is a new layer. I can turn this off or on. Okay, and with my spot healing brush tool, I have up here sample all layers checked. So that's super important. So just be sure if you're if you want to use these tools on new layers, just make sure it says sample all layers and you're good to go. Alright, so I'm removing all these little wrinkles, and this is not work that I want to do twice, right? I want to do this once, so that's why we always make sure to save out a version with our layered files. Alright, cool. So we'll just say, hey, that's a pretty good job. We removed those wrinkles. Let's get rid of that thing there in front of our subject's dress. Cool. We'll say, alright, that looks pretty good. Now the next thing we're going to do, my wrinkles are not perfect, but we'll just say they're pretty good for now. Next thing that I'd like to do is kind of enhance the color of this dress a little bit more, maybe push it more towards magenta. So I'm going to grab a hue saturation adjustment layer. Okay, we're going to go ahead and grab our reds. I'm going to choose my eyedropper to choose the reds that I'm actually going to affect, and then let's just push this hue a little bit towards the magenta side. Alright, that looks pretty cool. The only thing that I'm seeing is it's actually coloring our subject's skin as well, which we do not want. So I'm going to invert the layer mask there, and I'm going to paint white just over top of this dress. Okay, so we just only want this color shift to be visible over top of the dress. There we go, and let's just make sure it's not going to show up over our subject's skin. Okay, now our subject looks really great. Let's just say we want to create a new layer, and she does have like just a little bit of, just a tiny bit of like green tint in her skin. So I'm actually going to push that a little bit towards magenta. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to create a new layer. I'm going to go to image and down to apply image. There we go, which just puts a snapshot of everything I see on one layer. And then I'm going to go to filter and down to camera raw filter. And here we can just push certain areas closer to using our color temperature. We can go towards yellow or towards blue or green and magenta. So in this case, let's just zoom into our subject here. Okay, I'm going to use our adjustment brush. Let's go ahead and reset our settings here. I'm going to paint right over top of our subject. Now this is a JPEG, by the way, so ideally you would want to be working with a 16-bit raw image in Adobe Camera Raw, but JPEGs do work also. Alright, let's go ahead and turn those off. And then our tint here, I'm just going to add a little bit of magenta. Like not a ton, but just a little bit, and that's going to remove the green, okay? So if you want to just remove a green color cast from your subject's face, this is a good way to do it. All right, and that looks pretty good. Let's hit OK there. And then I can just zoom in and turn this off and on. So here's our before. You can see just a bit of a green tint, and the after, we're kind of correcting that green tint. Okay, it's a subtle shift, but definitely something that will help out, especially with skin tone. Okay, so now we're at the point where you're like, you know what, I like this file, it's looking pretty good, maybe I'll finish it off with a little bit of color. So let's go ahead, I'm going to grab a levels adjustment layer. Let's grab a blue channel. I'm going to pull a little bit of blue into the shadows and then some of this nice warm yellow into the highlights. All right, and we're looking really good here. Now let's just change this here. You can see there's our original photo here. Okay, you can see we've got some wrinkles in the dress that we worked on those. Okay, we did some work on the color of the dress itself. Okay, we did some work on her skin, turning that off and on, just removing some of the green from her skin. And then I'm going to turn my levels layer on, and we're ready to go. So you can see we've made quite a few different layers here, and now it's time to save our image out. So this is where we want to save two different versions. Again, one is going to be for us, for you, rather. This is going to be your layered file, so you can come back at any time. And then another version is going to be for your clients, for the web, for print, basically anything else. So let's go ahead and start with our layered file. So to save our layered file, I'm going to go to File and down to Save As. Okay, and then here we have the option within our Save dialog for our format. So Photoshop is going to come up by default, and that's going to save this as a PSD, which is a layered file. So we can see right here it says Layers. Okay, that's perfect. And it's going to embed the color profile that we're working on, which is perfect as well. So this is really, the option's up to you as whether you want to save this out as a Photoshop document or a TIFF. So I'm going to go down here to TIFF, and you're going to see we also have the option for layers. So Photoshop or TIFF. Now, usually industry standard is TIFF, and the reason is because any program, well, a lot of graphics programs can open TIFFs, but the only program that can open up a Photoshop document is Photoshop. So TIFFs are just a little bit more widely used. They're a little bit more compatible with other programs as well, and that's why those are kind of industry standard. But in terms of like working on your file and saving the information and everything like that, Photoshop document and TIFFs are pretty much the same. Okay, as long as you got Photoshop on your computer, you can open up both of those. They're both going to have layers. They both support 16-bit. They're both really, really good. Okay, so it's really just a personal preference. So let's just save this as a Photoshop document, because that's what most people do most of the time. It's just if you're going to be delivering images to clients and they don't have Photoshop, then it's a really good idea to use a TIFF. There we go. So we'll say how to export. There we go, one.psd, and we're going to go ahead and hit save. So you can see this says layers, and this file is going to have all of your layers intact. So that's perfect. So now it's time to export another version out that you're going to put on the web or deliver to your clients. So let's go to save that as a JPEG. We're going to go up to File, down to Export, and I'm going to go to Save for Web. Now this is my favorite dialog when I'm exporting out JPEGs or PNGs, because this automatically converts to the right color space, so it's going to look perfect on the internet. So let's go ahead and hit Save for Web. There we go. So here's our Save for Web dialog. Now I'm going to go ahead and zoom out so we can see a preview of our image. Okay, looks really great. Now my suggestion, if you're going to be putting this on the web and you don't need any transparency, you're going to be using a JPEG. And a JPEG is probably like the most common form of image you're going to see on the internet. Now, you can select a JPEG here. You can choose your quality. Now, in this case, I'm also going to resize this because this is like 4,000 pixels wide. It's really, really big. So let's just make it 1,200 pixels on the long edge. There we go, or 1,200 pixels wide, rather. Okay, that looks great. And now this option here is super important if you're going to be putting things on the internet. It says convert to sRGB. sRGB is actually the color space that web browsers use to read your colors in your images. So by converting to sRGB when you export, it's just basically saying that these colors are what the web browsers are going to see as well. That's just going to make sure that your colors display perfectly on the web. Now, if you want to double check that, just to make sure, this is a really great option right down here. I highly suggest it out. It's called this little preview button here. Just click on your little preview button, and this will actually load your image on the web. So you can see this is a preview of exactly how my image is going to look on the web. And here you can see like, oh, you know what, that's actually a little bit too big. So let's go back into Photoshop here. I can change my width down to 800 and hit enter. And click on preview. Okay, and we're going to see this is what our image looks like now. So the colors that you see here in this preview are going to be exactly the same colors that show up on the internet. So it's a really, really great way to save out your JPEGs. So getting back into Photoshop, we adjusted our size. That looks good. JPEG is good. You can choose your quality here. Okay. Now, generally, I find quality, the difference between like 80 and 100 is not very noticeable. So generally, even if I want to save it a high quality, usually I'll stop at about 80. Okay. If you want to save a little bit of space, you can bring your quality down. This will actually save your file size. So if someone's trying to load this image, it's just going to load faster. All right, so let's go ahead and choose a quality of 80 because that's usually what I choose. There we go. And I'm going to go ahead and hit save. All right, and we're just going to save this out as a JPEG. So let's go ahead and put it in the same folder. There we go. How to save and export 1.jpg. Let's just go sRGB. Just going to add that on there. All right, let's hit save. Okay. So what we just did is we saved out one version of this file, that's a layered file, and we saved out another version, that's a JPEG. So that JPEG, that's what you're going to be putting on the web. So let's go ahead and close everything down in Photoshop and show you the difference between the two. So we don't have anything in Photoshop here. Let's just double click here on our background. I'm going to open this, this image, save and export 1 sRGB, remember we just saved that, and our PSD. So always want to save two versions of your file. So let's hit open, at least two. Sometimes you can save more, but at least two. Okay, so here is our JPEG that we saved out. Okay, it looks great, but it doesn't have any layers. And the reason is JPEGs don't support layers. Okay, all JPEGs do not have layers. All JPEGs are going to be 8-bit as well. So I've actually gotten the question many times, do I have to flatten my layers before I save out as a JPEG? And the answer is no. I actually recommend never flattening any layers, because just by saving your document as a JPEG, it's going to automatically remove all the layers anyway. So anytime you're taking a layered file and saving it out as a JPEG, you don't have to worry about flattening because it will not have layers anyway. So this is our JPEG that we just made, and I can still go back. Let's say I'm back working on my JPEG, right? And I'm like, you know what? This looks pretty cool, but that coloring that I did at the end, I added the blue into the shadows and the yellow into the highlights. I don't like that anymore. I want to change that. Now, if you only have your JPEG to work on, basically you have to start completely over, okay? Because I can't just remove that color. It's actually baked into this file. But because we saved our PSD, let's go ahead and check that out. So here, again, this is our JPEG here, all right? And you can see this is our PSD. It says it right there. So let's hit F for full screen. Now our PSD, even though I closed this out and opened it back up again, all my layers are right here. So I can get back to my original at any point in time. I can turn these on and say, you know what, this coloring that I added at the end, I just don't like it. So all you have to do is just turn that off. You're good to go, and you can just save out another version of your file. And that's all there is to it. So remember, no need to flatten your layers at any point in time. For you want to make sure you save out a PSD or a TIFF, and then when you're ready to put that image on the internet or send it off to web or your client, that's when you want to save out that JPEG as another version of your file. Thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed watching this tutorial. I've had an absolute blast making it. It's a kind of a cold day in Chicago. I hope it's a warm, sunny day wherever you are. Thanks again. I'll learn you later. Bye, everyone.